as I hope Carolyn shared, was one of the kind of original wrestling prep guinea pigs, and have since gone on to wrestle in college, and then found my own company, and that's been super successful in a similar kind of dedication and hard work to wrestling. But wanted to share just kind of the story of how we got there, and then encourage everyone to just really, the same way you approach wrestling, approach college, and hopefully wrestling in college, and then beyond that, building your own stuff and not being scared to kind of jump headfirst into things. So I could just start a little bit about how I kind of got into wrestling, and then how that led me to college wrestling first, if that sounds good.
Please.
So I started wrestling late, a lot later than some of you guys. So I started my freshman year after realizing I was too small to be a linebacker in football anymore. And so I jumped into wrestling and never thought that I would like it, but became instantly obsessed with it, and how, every ounce of effort you put into it comes out the other side, and it's, you can't blame it on anything else. So that was really what got me into the kind of addiction of wrestling, which I'm sure you guys all have. But after that, shortly after, I met Carolyn, and to make up for lost time of not wrestling at a young age, just really started trying to find every extracurricular wrestling activity we could find. So I started wrestling at Stanford, and that's where I met Carolyn. So we just go over there. We were lucky to be right next door, so in Palo Alto, so we could just go over and wrestle on Sundays there. And pretty soon it was, going all the way up to Gilroy and to the East Bay, anywhere we could find better competition to get better. And there were really only 2 or 3 of us at that point. And it was really the beginnings of what it's been amazing to watch wrestling prep turn into. So I honestly think that was the first place where I got the entrepreneurial bug, because I saw Carolyn really just not only vaguely knowing about wrestling, but going headfirst in and, putting every ounce of effort into kind of an entrepreneurial thing of like, let's get these kids better, and no ulterior motives, just like, let's push everyone to get better. And so very, very, very quickly, I saw the outcomes of hard work, like diving into things, but also just the prospects of, being a really subpar wrestler to, hey, wow, there's more opportunities, can start taking down better people, and then start placing at tournaments, became a real opportunity. And then even from there, wrestling in college was never a sure thing. So was able to really start having that same confidence in wrestling to start saying, hey, maybe I can wrestle in college with Carolyn's help. She was making introductions to everyone, helping get in front of other coaches, beyond just Stanford, but coaches all over the nation. And that was really like, there was no playbook for how this was happening. We were figuring out all the nutritional stuff, waking up at 6 a.m. to run around the track with boots on. It was trial by fire. And really that's the best way to understand like entrepreneurial spirit. Like, some stuff you do is going to work out. Some stuff is going to not work out, but you'll learn what doesn't work out. So it's been really cool to see the progression of wrestling prep. And even today, it seems like it's adapting to remote kind of COVID stuff and keeping in shape from home. So definitely was able to see the kind of gain the confidence and see the benefits of really just like throwing stuff out there and seeing what sticks, and did the same with like college applications. So I was, not even a state placer. I placed it, I think, freestyle state, but wasn't a California placer. But with just getting in front of the right people and working every day to get better, was able to get into Colorado School of Mines and a couple other schools. And by that time I was, I'm definitely wrestling in college. That was like my goal. So I was able to kind of get into a couple places and have my pick of a few colleges, even though I wasn't, an all-star. So I think for anyone looking at wrestling in college, I would just highly, highly recommend it, because it gives you like the structure you need. You can take a lot of paths in college, but I think the one that wrestling leads you down is a lot of, discipline. You have school goals alongside of your kind of athletic goals, and it's a pretty exciting place to be, because it's not quite as intense as football. You can still have a social life and do well in classes, but kind of benefit from both sides of the coin there. So I was able to get in there. I filled a spot at 141, but was by far not a subpar wrestler in college, I would say. And it still afforded me tons of opportunities. I was able to get on scholarship because I was a small scholarship because I was filling a weight class that we 100% needed, and really learned a lot from wrestling and going to a better school than I probably could have gotten into without wrestling because of that. So did I freeze there? Can everyone hear?
Yeah, we can hear you, Cup.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So moral of the first part of like my wrestling career is, even without, what most people would define as wrestling success, it can bring you tons of other kind of opportunities that you wouldn't have without it. It's not, you don't have to be the best athlete in the world as long as you work hard and kind of really show your dedication. I think it opens up more doors than trying to be the best football player or kind of some of these other sports that are much more popular. And I think it also just, it's such a sport based on the work you put in that it lends itself really well to, being successful outside of wrestling as well. And a lot of my friends like John Hall, who was in the early days, and Patty were kind of setting themselves up for also just like looking at every problem that they try and work on or solve, whether it's professional or personal, with the same kind of tenacity. And so I would recommend everyone at least explore kind of the college opportunity of athletics, and look at how you can learn from that hard work and dedication in other parts of your life too, because it's something, I will always look to hire other wrestlers and other college athletes, because you just know how difficult it can be and how character building it is, especially with all the distractions of college too.
Can I say something, Coop?
Yeah.
The other boys that were part of the original group, we had John Hall, who went on to Boston University. He was a 2-time NCAA qualifier. Now is a vice president at Fleet Street Bank in Boston. We had Patty, who I think is a PhD now in something, I don't know. He's a giant brain. Cooper. And then we had 2 world-class guys that work with us also, Jason Welch and Nico Trigas. And Jason went on, because of Cooper and the other kids around, Jason had always thought he would only go to like Iowa State or something. Not that there's anything wrong with those schools, but I would say to him, Jason, you can go to a good school. You can be the writer you want to be. And because he was around Cooper, because he was around Patty, because he was around John, and his sister Brooke was part of our group, and my oldest daughter wrestled with them too, but he started to think that he could. And he ended up going to Northwestern and graduated from Northwestern, now has his graduate degree. He wrestled internationally, 3-time NCAA All-American, 1-time finalist, and now the head coach at San Francisco State. But if he was here, he would be telling you what an inspiration Cooper was to him. And both Jason and Nico treated Cooper and Patty and John the exact same, because everybody worked so hard. And we would get in the car and drive 3 hours, 2 hours. I mean, we wouldn't be driving 3 hours worth of miles, but in Bay Area traffic, and Cooper used to be car sick, and he got to sit in the front seat with me to do his homework so he wouldn't get car sick. And then everybody else would have to sit in the back seat. But these guys all came up together. They were the original, and every one of them is highly successful. Nico wrestled for Ohio State. I don't know how many gold medals he's won and world team medals. And they were all together. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, and they were always, way better too. So it's like, you're always going to get better through hard work, and there's going to be somebody who's always better than you. But I wouldn't let that ever get you discouraged from like trying to wrestle up at the next level and do those things as well. Because I was by far not like a top tier, and that became even more prevalent in college. Everyone's top tier in college, but it's still like such a bond with everyone. And Colorado School of Mines was an awesome place to go. They do an alumni duel every year where all the old alumni come back and they get very relaxed rules at the duel, but it's pretty hilarious. But yeah, then from there, it was an amazing engineering school, and got to go to work at Sennheiser, which is a headphone company, for a while before going to Stanford grad school and finding another niche with like music and computer science. So it was, probably couldn't have gotten into Stanford with my GRE scores alone, or because I wasn't the highest GRE, or in an engineering heavy program, but found this really amazing creative program there where, not as many people apply, but it's just as amazing of teachers and classmates. So another way of kind of squeezing into a really great opportunity when not at the tip top of like scores or anything. So there's always ways in. I would always explore, even if you think like the numbers on paper say it's wrong, you can find ways in. You can email professors, you can walk in the door at places, and personal relationships matter a ton. There might be wrestlers who used to wrestle and are now professors, so there's always ways in. And then right out of there, while we were in school, we had a class on entrepreneurship. I had actually been a temporary employee at Sennheiser and saw how the staffing agency that was my actual employer, that was, contracting me to Sennheiser, it was a pretty bad experience with the actual staffing agency. Lots of paperwork. It was a very inefficient process. So I was able to use that opportunity to think of how to make it better in this entrepreneurship class. I thought I was always going to do something in music, but we, for that class, put together, a pitch and presented it to real venture capitalists. We built like a very simple texting engine to show people where jobs were, like, hey, this moving company's moving here and they need 20 people. Like, can you make it? Yes or no? And we actually got a moving company signed on and had to make the really hard decision of, wow, this is actually, somebody's willing to pay us for this. Do we want to make this a company? And from there, we founded Blue Crew, which is where we are today. But it's essentially an automated temporary staffing company. So we help thousands of employees every day find work that's well above minimum wage. And as opposed to kind of Uber drivers and 1099 contractors, they get benefits, sick pay, overtime. So in times like this kind of COVID crisis, it's even more rewarding to see, that we took the high road and we're giving people lots of benefits, and work is so precious right now that, very, very proud that we've been able to provide so many jobs to employees across the nation now. So yeah, that's.
Can you talk a little bit about how when you went to, I never say the word right, Sennheiser, that you really were instrumental though in helping them redesign. You like you were talking about before, when you would wrestle, you just like throw yourself into it, and you made significant strides there for them and some of their speakers. Or is that correct?
Yeah, it was an R&D office.
Might have to tell them what that is.
Research and development, yeah. So it was, really cool future-looking microphones and headphones, surround sound speakers and surround sound microphones that capture stuff for VR. So all kinds of really cool future-looking things that are only just now kind of being productized and polished. But approached that, it was a random internship, and approached that the only way I knew how, which was I walked into their office with a resume and threw it down when I couldn't find another internship, and my dad was just making me build sheds in the back. So I just walked in, and this was all PhD level computer scientists, and I was a guy who used super glue to stick things together, and they just acknowledged the hustle, I guess, and gave me an interview, and they were like, yeah, we need somebody to do, super glue things together in the back. So just any opportunity to kind of stick your neck out. A lot of people won't do it. And in the same vein, there's lots of opportunities for companies. I think everyone has really good ideas all the time. It's just not a lot of people actually try it. The worst that can happen is you fail, just like losing a match. And so, yeah, I have a bunch of resources for anyone who's interested on just like the things that no one will tell you about, like how to found incorporate your company. So there's software for everything now, so it's really easy. But even if it's, trying to found an LLC or trying to start up a wrestling kind of business or any kind of business, you're probably better off just trying it and working with the same determination of wrestling. And then worst case, you fail. And there's just so much opportunity that, yeah.
Can we talk about the project you did with the graduate professor, I believe, at Stanford around the mosquitoes?
Yeah.
Tell them my point here, guys, is here's a guy who, when I met him, we both lived, we lived pretty close to each other in Palo Alto, but Cooper would have to, his mom is tenacious, diligent engineer, military child person. Is that safe to say, Coop?
Mm-hmm.
And Cooper would get on his bike and ride in traffic over to Stanford. Here's this kid who built his way up as a wrestler. I mean, people literally used to get so mad. Remember Cody Rodabaugh's dad, who was a state champ, wanting to hit me, like trying to strike at me because Cooper almost beat his son, and I'm coaching Cooper from the side, and just so upset because he was not known, but he didn't care. He just threw himself at it, and we would just practice all the time. And then he goes to college, and then he goes to Stanford, and while he's there in graduate school in acoustic engineering, he meets this professor, and he does this internship, but he scores in all these situations. None of the situations pass him by. He didn't care. It was just like wrestling, whether you win or lose, he's going to put his best effort forward. He knew how to handle the loss or the rejection, I guess is the right thing, right?
Yeah,
so
lots of losses.
Talk about the professor and the mosquitoes.
Yeah, so one of the projects that I worked on at Stanford was with the bio department, and the school I was in at Stanford is called Karma, CCRMA, and it's all about just like mixing with other departments. So I went to the bioengineering department, and they actually had a huge culture of a bunch of mosquitoes, which are very like acoustic animals. They use their buzzing sounds actually to mate, which is very weird, but they like the males, the way they impress females is like they match up their wing speeds, so they buzz at the right amount. And so the professor there, Manu Prakash, who's his whole thing is frugal science. So trying to help third world countries build really expensive or really complicated, expensive, typically expensive science tools in really easy to think ways. So he made a 25-cent microscope, which is based on origami, to like really look at things, and they give them away free. They're pretty amazing, as an example. But he had this idea to monitor kind of the dangerous types of mosquitoes that carry malaria and Zika virus, to kind of make sure that those areas can kill the mosquitoes before they're infecting humans. So the way that people typically do that is richer countries like the US have insect control departments that, will test the water to make sure that mosquitoes aren't the bad type that can carry these diseases. And then in like really poor countries, they'll actually go out and have a guy sit in a field with his pants legs rolled up, and the mosquitoes will come and bite him, and they'll suck him up with a tube. Like, it's insane. I don't know who they get to do that, and then they'll count them, and they'll see like how many of the bad types there are, and if they need to fumigate or kill them. So a super inefficient way. And the number one way to kind of kill those diseases is the same way they're doing COVID right now, is contact tracing. So figuring out the vectors of these bad mosquitoes that carry the disease and wiping them out, or, defoliating, or, stripping out the brush and things that they feed on. So his idea was to take cell phones, which everyone has, and crowdsource the buzzing of the mosquitoes, and then use like machine learning and kind of those algorithms to understand where they are. So we spent a year and a half, 2 years recording mosquito buzzes with our phones, and then running that data through a bunch of algorithms to understand and identify each mosquito, because each species has like a range of buzzing tones. So pretty awesome. And I think there's some projects still going on with it where you can record a mosquito with your phone and identify which, types of mosquitoes it probably is.
And what disease it's carrying.
Well, yeah, we had some early theories that maybe, because a sick mosquito might carry a different buzz. So the theory was, if we could get enough kind of species data long-term, we could figure out too, like, does the buzz of a mosquito carrying Zika sound different than a healthy mosquito?
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Could you talk through the Blue Cruise? So I remember when you were starting, and then I think you all were at an incubator. Is that correct? At an incubator? Can you talk about that to them, and then let them see if someone want to ask questions? But just the process, because really a lot of these people, a lot of wrestlers, are insightful, analytical people. Maybe not, might not translate into math grade or science grade or physics grades, but they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to sequentially move in order to be successful. So I think they come up with ideas, but they might have not have the people around them that can help them interpret how they could potentially turn that into the business. And I'd like them all to leave knowing that, or at least understanding that there is a process that they could eventually get to, and not to cast their good ideas aside or to lose faith that there might be opportunity for them, outside of what's just immediately visible.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did, before, or kind of right in the early stages of our company, we were looking at how we were going to keep running, because we were broke students, and we'd heard about, we were getting to the point where we had to decide if we go out and try and find a job, or like keep risking it on this what seemed preliminary venture that seemed more like a class project. So it was a big decision, but we heard about Y Combinator, which is an incubator. And so this is essentially a group of startups that get together, that has like mentors that can help you through the questions of starting a company. And they invest a little bit of money. So you submit an application, And if you get past that, you actually interview a really quick, intense interview with the mentors and investors. And then you're off to the races in a 3-month sprint to get product traction or show any traction. So they have, about 100 companies every semi-year, and they're betting on those companies to be good. And they actually really like the diversity of kind of different ideas from different places. So they're not looking for only, grad school people. They're looking for people who have good teams that can solve those problems. Teamwork is a big part of it. They don't like, single founders who can solve one problem. They like, people who've experienced these firsthand and had, real experience. They aren't just trying to think about a new thing to make a bunch of money. They're really thinking about like a problem and solving it, and in a creative way, which I do think wrestlers are very good at that. And hard work is the biggest piece of that too. You are working 24/7 for that 3 or 4 months, and then you pitch to venture capitalists who are then, deciding if you have enough traction, you have a good enough idea, and if you seem like successful founders enough to go the next level. And, there's no better hardworking people than wrestlers. So I can't tell you how many times Blue Crew was sitting there with, less than 2 weeks of payroll left on the books, and just hard work and luck got us through it. Because, there were a lot of like points when we were teetering on the edge of life and death. But yeah, that's Y Combinator. You can apply online, and I would encourage anyone to give it a shot if you have good ideas.
I think a lot of everybody, when they think of entrepreneurs now, we didn't really, maybe the show was up and running when you were starting, but when I was at venture capital, it certainly wasn't, right? So for you guys who don't know, I was in the VC world prior to stopping working, and then that's around the same time I met Cooper and Patty and everyone, all those guys together when Michael wanted to wrestle. So it just makes me laugh thinking about it. But now I think a lot of people are influenced by things like Shark Tank, and it is not that way. Shark Tank is a very monetized, emotional reality TV, and that is not what entrepreneurship is about. Years ago, they wanted to do a TV show on Mike Krause about Mike Krause and wrestling youth parents. And they came over to our facility, and the people were like, "This is terrible. You don't have any out of control parents here." I'm like, "Yeah, and I would never even let them stay if they were like that." And so it's not reality. So what you see on Shark Tank, all that emotion, and you have to be this or you have to be that, and you're not pitching to people like Mark Cuban and those guys who want to be sensationalized on TV. There are some jerks in the group, but normally it's people who are really trying to get an investment on their dollar, but also want to develop companies, because there's other ways to get your money back and make more money than dealing with a startup. It's sort of like when people come to me and they say, I want my kid to be on your team. And I'm like, well, we don't really have a team. Everybody's welcome. I treat everybody the same. And they can't get it. They think that I only want to work with the very best kids. And a lot of you on this call, and Cooper knows, I don't want to put up with people who don't want to work hard. I won't. That's why I won't coach at a school. I'm not putting up with any of that. And what I'm telling you is, in venture capital, the people that are out there, they want to help you. They are looking to get on somebody else's bandwagon, and it's not like reality TV. Cooper is not a reality TV kind of kid. There was nothing. I'm going to tell this story, and he may remember. We were at Stanford. He'd gone to a dance. I asked him if he kissed the girl, and he goes, "Maybe, I think so," or something. You remember that? like
I definitely did.
Yeah, right. But this kid was not. He's not slick, right? He's not on Instagram, throwing down, all these rappers on his Instagram story and acting like he's got game. Cooper's just a normal guy who was tenacious to the very end toward doing something he wanted to achieve, not toward making other people like him. And his mom was not encouraging social behavior, I would say, right? Like remember the whole you can only eat out one time a month thing, besides my house or something? Do you remember that? She called me. So his mom's lovely, but I'm just saying he's not like this flamboyant person. He's not Shark Tank, and you don't have to be either to be successful at wrestling or successful as an entrepreneur, for sure. Do you guys want to ask him some questions? I'm going to take the mute off. All right, let's hear some questions. Okay, Jordan, what's your question, buddy?
So when he was saying like how you had to go through the things and then you got to do the interview and then everything else after that, is it kind of like stages through everything?
Yeah. So you write a written application, and then where you explain your idea and your backgrounds, and then the next one is like it's hard to explain how quick it was. It was like a 5-minute interview where they don't even let you finish your questions. It's like, and they're really good questions. Like, how are you going to deal with this? Have you thought about that? So the whole time you're thinking like, oh, we're doing terrible on this, but they really just want to see if you've thought through a lot and if you're quick on your feet. And if they can think of those like 5 minutes of questions and stump you, you're really like, how are you going to deal with, the challenges that are thrown at you? So, they're really just trying to make sure you're bought in, and but it was really quick. And we were just, after that, we were like, I think that went poorly, but actually ended up getting back in. So it was a cool process.
Yeah.
And it's, a great community too. Like, everyone's there to help you, similar to wrestling prep. They're not there to like, boast their ego. They're there to help you be a successful business. And even if that means being they do nonprofits, they do other kind of companies that aren't purely profit-based. So it's just a really good opportunity to not get because there are some venture capitalists who are just looking at how much money they can make. And you see some of these companies approach it with like the growth at all costs thing. So we really resonated with Y Combinator and their approach with these do good companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jordan's from Missouri.
Cool.
I think he's been coming to camp since 2000.
4 years?
3 years.
2016.
Yeah, he flew out by himself. How old were you then?
Like 9.
Yeah, he flew out by himself to California.
8. I was 8.
Wow.
He's probably a good candidate. The other thing Cooper didn't tell you that there's a mashup group called the Catalina Rhyme Mixers. That's actually Cooper and his buddy from down the street in high school, right?
Yeah.
Y'all still do that anymore?
Not really.
But you can still find those tracks, right?
Somewhere, I'm sure online, yeah.
If you Google you, it comes up.
Yeah.
All those pictures of you all sitting in the vest and stuff.
Yep. That was our college DJ years.
Joel went all over the place with that, right?
Yeah. Taylor Swift retweeted one of our mashups, and that was probably the most famous I've ever felt.
I guess that'd probably do it, right? Nathan, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. So, Mr. Newby, so obviously, like, you're very successful at a very young age. So I was wondering, like, what kind of stuff, like, while you're in high school, did you do to prepare yourself for that kind of success so early?
I mean, most what I was doing in high school was wrestling. Like, that was I've just kind of approached everything that I do. I get obsessed with one thing, and wrestling was that in high school. Music was also another kind of thing that I got really obsessed with. And I think like just like follow what you like doing. And, a lot of people try and set you up for careers that think you'll make a ton of money in. I went to a school that produces a lot of like oil and gas engineers, and it's a very like, oh, you'll get this salary coming out of school. So I just wouldn't follow the money and follow the things that you really like. I think wrestling's a good example of that. Just like put everything you can into the things that you like, so that you're willing to work really hard at them every day. And then one, two, three of them will end up being successful, even if some of them aren't. Like I was not a successful college wrestler by any means. Had a very losing record in college. So it's a reality check.
I would say when Cooper said he'd get obsessed with something and he would go after it, Cooper was very good at managing his time. So if he became obsessed with something, other things didn't fall short. And then he had a very high expectation of how to fill the box of the time that he was doing at the moment. So if he was doing something, it was the time to do it. He filled that every bit of that space out with what he was doing. He did not, I never said, hey, Cook, like he said, we were just figuring it out. This is 2006. And I'd say, Cook, John, whoever, Patty, Nico, let's try the Hunter Collins. Let's try this. And he'd be right there, just right in the box with me. And we didn't know, not like now where all these kids have come through, where we're sure. We didn't know. And I mean, I influenced Jason and Nico, but they were on their way when we all hit up. But I would say, Nathan, that whenever he did something, he did it all the way. And he did not use his natural intelligence to try to quibble about whether the advice he was being given was factual or not. He just did it. Is that safe to say, Cook?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's similar to wrestling too. Like, you're never gonna be the best by being the best. You're gonna be the best by like trying to find other people that are better than you and wrestling them, and that's the only way you'll get better. And it's the same with like everything. There's no way we could have done Blue Crew without the help of my co-founder and my Colorado School of Mine's best friend, who ended up being our first employee. Like, they were all college athletes and incredibly motivated too, and good at different things that I was terrible at. Like, some of the financial pieces or other pieces that there's no way you can be the best at everything. So just try and find other people that can either complement you or push you to be better yourself.
Is that helpful, Nathan?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Who else has a question? Oh, come on. Okay, Cody, yay. And Zach. Oh, we got two. Cody, you go first, then Zach Macias.
Is there like multiple ways to like help fund a startup when you're doing it?
Yeah. So there's, you always just want to be like as frugal as you can, I think, is the one thing, and trying to be profitable is good. There's a lot of startups that just spend and end up getting in trouble at some point. So we found it was helpful to be a couple steps from being profitable if we needed to be. But yes, there are many ways. There's typically you start with like angel investing or family and friends, where like you can just test something at a very small scale and try and show yourself some traction that other investors down the line might. So venture capitalists, which are kind of like the next step up from angel investors, which are institutional investors. But then there's also lots of cool stuff with banks, where you can, like, if you have a profitable startup or a startup that's kind of starting to get traction, we did a kind of debt round where you basically take out, or a working capital line, which is you take out a loan for some of your expenses, so you're not kind of floating a bunch of money. And then there's also really, I've been impressed by some creative like nonprofits where you can get a lot of really cool grants and things to actually help fund your startup as well. But the best way is to kind of like, you know, it's really hard to start one where you're not making any money, because then you're just measured by like, you know, how many people are using your app or how many daily users, and how are you going to monetize that in the future?
And right when 2000, I moved to California in 1999. It went through the internet bubble, and I remember arriving there, and I think the first turnaround I did in BC was for a Mayfield Fund for my 11th. Yeah, the guy who didn't you all stay at his ski lodge in Colorado or something? 11thals.
Oh yeah.
I remember that. So anyway, I went to my first Monday morning VC meeting where they run all the ideas by, and they were talking about how this website, theman.com, was going to make all of its money by providing information like how men should write a thank you note when they get to give a wedding gift or something. And they were just going to make all this money off advertising. And I thought, you know, I might be a cracker from Kentucky, but there's no way. No way that was going to work. But people, you know, like people bought into it. So now everybody's sort of the opposite. So if you haven't have some revenue proof, or you haven't, there's not a clear path to the revenue with a proven market and a product that meets the market that you actually have. A lot of times people create products, Cody, that because it's cool, but there's not actually a market for it. So you have to sell what you have to people who will buy it while you create what the market actually wants. And in that process, there's different levels of investors who want to participate, and in exchange for different amounts of takeaway from what you're doing. So, but I haven't worked in VCs in a long time. So Cooper is the expert, and I'm, you know, past, but that's how we got to that point that Cooper's describing, where he said, you know, now you need to make a little bit of money because millions and millions and millions of dollars were lost, because when the internet came out, just like with this COVID, when we get through the second wave of infection, there are going to be all these businesses that come out about this COVID, but only probably, you know, 120 of them is going to be worthwhile if we have another pandemic. So the same thing happened when the internet and the chance for people to go online and stuff, the assumptions about what it was going to be was so great, but there was no fact. People just put all this money in without their proven revenue. And I didn't want to participate in any turnaround where I couldn't see the revenue, and I didn't get it. I mean, it had to be where it's going to be. And this is where wrestling comes in. A lot of people, when they're training to wrestle, they're looking for the shortcut to greatness, and there is none. There is no shortcut. So they'll see something, or they'll be on flow, and they'll be, oh, Derringer does his throw this way. And then they trash all their training and go out and try to copy someone, or they buy into some hype where there's no proof. There's no proof. And Cooper will tell you, even when I didn't know very much about wrestling initially, I was uncomfortable letting Cooper and Patty and John be in situations, you know, even whether it was quote unquote the coach, if I couldn't see proof that what they were doing was going to work. Isn't that true, Cooper?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
For sure. All right, who has another question? Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, Zach. Macias. Yes.
If you want to be an entrepreneur, do you think it's important to go to a college that has an entrepreneurship program compared to just like a normal business school?
No, I honestly think like business school can sometimes, business school has a lot more ego involved. So it's a lot more like, oh, you know, resume boosting, which is really great and can give you some really amazing opportunities. But I think the most important thing about doing that is just starting yourself, because if you don't start, you won't learn like what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of people just think, you know, I want a really stable job or whatever, but you can still try things on the side, and college is a great place to like explore some of those, you know, passions or ideas. And you can kind of test the waters a bit and decide if you have like the stomach for it. Cause there are like lots of ups and downs. A lot of people will tell you it's a bad idea for this, that, and their, inherent biases. But I think just starting, so there's, I didn't do any business school. I did engineering, which was helpful on like the building side. But I think if you can find the right people to help on the like engineering side and the right people to help on like the operations, like get it done, just solve this problem that's coming up, try different things really quickly and not be afraid to fail, then you can be successful. And the business part just comes naturally. Like you don't need to go to business school to understand the financials, at least in the early days. And that's all stuff you can learn while doing. So I just keep like a journal of like good ideas, and then see if you can find a great like partner who's just as interested, who can complement your skills. And that's like, and just try something with them. It can be something as simple as like putting up a website and seeing if it's interesting to some people, like trying to build a community, even if that's through a text group or something, and see if like some of these things that you can try really quickly, like through messaging or through forums, catches on. And then if it does, you can take it from there. And those are good ways to try it out before you're having to quit your day job or whatever.
There's a lot of truth to what he's saying. So in 1998, my former husband and I were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there was a cold fusion development group who started making three-dimensional databases using a form of artificial intelligence, which is now what we call decision-making, or did in the early 2000s when I was still doing VC, decision-making software. So what happened was that we got an inquiry, I did, through RevGen, asking about Air Motors and how could they possibly reduce the number of engineers they had to hire, their payroll, their burn, because every time somebody wanted to buy an air compressor, there had to be an engineer who could take the torque and the pounds and do the math and tell them what kind of engine they had to get. And so Eric was fiddling around with this cold fusion group, and he realized these young guys are like 17 and 18. He wasn't very much older at the time, maybe 24 or 5, but he figured it out. And so we sold that capability to Ingersoll Rand, to Volvo, and that started us on a path toward entrepreneurship that we did really not know was possible. Eric, my former husband, who most people know now, was one of the leads at Amazon Web Services, and now is in Google, whatever he runs there. He didn't graduate from college. He left college after his sophomore year, but he was very passionate about programming and how to meet the need of somebody in business. So instead of trying to find an idea that was new, like the new latest, he was good at talking to people and sort of, what's the word, when you ask questions to get information out of them, what was slowing their business down, and then he would try to build databases to fit that need. And so we went from North Carolina, I ran RevGen, we went to Silicon Valley, he was at Oracle, then Amazon Web Services, and now Google. And that was all that process. And Cooper was around probably when he was still at Oracle, right when we were we were divorced or divorcing, I think, when I knew you, Cooper, but when I first met Cooper. But that's sort of what Cooper's telling you, is that it doesn't have to be that way, because you could find somebody else. I was really good at business development and turnaround, so people would talk to me and say, this is what I needed, and I would explain it to Eric, then Eric would techize it, for lack of a better word, and understand how to solve the problem. Then he would explain to me how to say it, and then I did the finance. I understood the financial numbers, so I could go to someone and say, hey, I think we can change your burn on employees by 40% in the engineering department, which is their highest paid people. So, those types of things. And we ended up selling that process to Booz Allen and Hamilton and another company. So you don't have to be, you don't have to be an MBA and a lawyer and all these things, but there has to be something about you that makes the other person who has the shared passion like you. So for whatever reason, Cooper and Patty and John and Jason, because Jason came to me and asked me if he could travel with me like I did with Nico, even though I wasn't as smart about wrestling as I am now, and I do think I'm a good wrestling coach, a great wrestling coach, but there was something about me that resonated with Cooper's desire to be good at something. So that's what you need, I think, more than the specific education. Would you agree with that, Cooper, in some ways, or?
100%, yeah. Like I can't stress how much of how cool it is to see where wrestling prep was and where it is now. It's like, it was its own, that's why I say startup is a loose term, because I see a startup as anything that you can like build a community around. And so I think it was very much Carolyn stepping outside of her comfort zone every day. Like, and it's the same with us at Blue Crew. We'd go to interview sessions with 20 random people on ads we posted on Craigslist, had no idea what we were doing. It feels at sometimes like, is this the right thing? Why are we doing this? And me as an awkward, nerdy kid, I felt so uncomfortable. But the same way Carolyn went to wrestling tournaments and had to deal with every coach giving her all kinds of attitude and saying, you can't do this. Like, why don't you spend more time on the good kids? Why are you so even keel? And it took like three years of that. And even from the beginning of that with 3 people in a van to every coach in the California area, starting to notice Carolyn, to now where it's national. It took stepping outside of your comfort zone and just being really interested. But it does help to not know a lot about it, right? Like if Carolyn knew everything about wrestling when she started it, she might have a bunch of reasons to not try and do this. So I think it's just stepping outside of your comfort zone and finding people that have the same goals.
Who else has
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jordan.
So he said that he liked football, but he ended up being too short that not too short, too small, sorry. And then he liked music. But then how did you know that you wanted to go to college and start wrestling? How'd you know?
I started freshman year of high school wrestling right after football. And I was too small to be linebacker. So yeah, I knew instantly that I wanted to wrestle in college once I got the wrestling bug. But Carolyn was a big influence in actually pushing me to wrestle in college, because I just thought I didn't have those opportunities, especially with amazing wrestlers like Jason Welch around. I thought, I was devastated when I didn't place or I didn't make it to states. But she really pushed me and said, there are these opportunities. And before I knew it, I was in front of coaches who, who were very open to you can work your way up, you can walk on. So it was pretty cool to have that opportunity, because I was so obsessed with wrestling.
Yeah.
Who else has a question? Oscar?
What was your mindset when you started trying to become an entrepreneur?
It wasn't like I woke up and was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. It was really we went out and worked our first shift for, when we were working with this moving company as part of this class. And the first thing we saw was people standing around on their phones for 45 minutes waiting for the supervisor to show up. And turns out we were at the wrong building, and start talking with a bunch of the guys working on this job. And they were they're making they were making $15 an hour in the Bay Area, working their butts off. Like it was a 14-hour day at Facebook moving desks. And we were just like, how is this such a broken system that, they have to show up at 5:30 in the morning, wait for this long to be making minimum wage and moving around all these tech companies. So it's very clear that it was just like a super antiquated way to run a business, these temporary staffing agencies. And it felt like unfair to these workers. So we really resonated with that. And that's been the driving force for like building something cool, is just like solving problem after problem. And still every day it's like, there's still lots of problems to be solved. So it never feels like, oh, we've built something that's done. So it's really just the mindset of like, let's solve this problem. That's the driving force there.
Yeah. Way down. Very good.
Who else has a question? Brennan, you have a question? Anybody? Sounds like somebody. Go. Oh, yes, sir.
Hey, Carolyn, thank you for arranging. This is really quite interesting. Hi, Cooper.
Hi.
I was curious, how are you able to identify a problem? And then how did you go about making a solution to the problem? And then, of course, building a company upon that solution.
Yeah. Well, I think like the number one way, there's so many problems to solve and like, I think the solution is the hard part. Like, I think the best way to identify the problem is kind of look, like Carolyn was mentioning with these businesses, they're not the big sexy problems that everyone talks about, like VR for whatever, like those things are kind of once in a lifetime moonshots, but there's a lot of really unsexy problems that lie underneath like other industries. Like if you just look at how a business runs, I think COVID is exposing a lot of these too, where just like things are inefficient and there's better ways to do them. So kind of looking for the unsexy problems that nobody wants to do because they're unsexy or hard work. I've seen so many companies like that just take one piece of like a construction business and optimize that and become super successful, or the wasteful pieces of other pieces. But I think the best way to know if what you're doing is working is to see traction and building something that your clients like. So like putting it out before you think it's ready is really key, so that you're just like getting feedback early. If you wait until it's like polished, you'll never get enough feedback and you'll miss out. So I think like, the example is us putting out that texting engine. We could have spent 3 months building out more pieces, but we just like opened Sesame, the product, and we're able to learn a lot really quickly, and then just see like more and more people using it. So I think trying it on a very small scale is the best first step. And then you'll know if like some things just won't be a good solution, and some things you'll be able to kind of change a little bit to solve it a different way, and that will work much better.
I'm curious, so what was the specific problem you saw in the marketplace?
So ours was that these staffing agencies were all exactly the same and operated in a very manual fashion. So the staffing agencies call up all the workers in a very randomized fashion, or like they'll have their spreadsheet of their favorite workers and they'd call them up to see if they were going to work this shift. By automating the connection that the staffing agencies were doing on the phone and giving transparency to both sides, so the worker knew exactly how much they'd get paid and what the job description was and what other workers were saying about that company. And then the companies could see like, oh, this is a great worker. We don't have to rely on Steve in his office to call a recruiter, to call the worker. It can happen instantly. So it was kind of like taking out the manual matching process.
Yeah, I would like to have a conversation with you offline if that's possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Great, thanks.
I would say to take it just a little bit further, a lot of people when they start companies are fearful of letting their idea be exposed. Sometimes it's because they think someone might take it, or that's the excuse they use, but often it has to do with self-image. So a lot of people operate on assumptions and assertions, and they make an assumption based on an assertion in their market space, and then they keep going, and then they decide to release, but probably those assumptions and assertions weren't correct. So an example in wrestling would be, a lot of people come to me and they say, I'm not very good, I need to start over. And as you know, with your own son, I said, hey buddy, we just need to change your stance and use your muscles better. Because his other coaches had already made an assumption and an assertion. You need to work harder, you're not good enough, you need to train more. And I went back and said, let's start right here at the beginning. And it's not sexy, it's tedious, and people don't like it. So when I would be asked to do a turnaround for a company, the way I would structure my fee would be based on how many assumptions or assertions they built up. If there were a lot of assumptions and assertions, I knew right away I was probably going to have to get rid of the head guy, that their product probably wasn't not sellable to a real market. I'd have to make sure that the product development people could really develop and were willing to listen when we actually determined what the market was and go back. So I would say is having limited assumptions and assertions and testing each one in the process and not being afraid of exposing. Because people used to say to me, Cooper might remember this, and I don't know, maybe, I think Drew had to drop off the call for a meeting with Centus. But a lot of people say to me, I'm going to do wrestling prep, but we're going to be better. And at first it used to make me nervous because I knew a lot of coaches were kind of not great. And Cooper could tell you that he watched me deal with a lot of those people. But I realized really quickly they were never going to outwork me. They would never outwork with me. Because what I wanted to do was for somebody else, not myself. And I wasn't afraid to fail. I was afraid not to try. Because if I had turned to the left or the right every time somebody stood in front of me and didn't even want to let me in the tournament, or grabbed my arm and pulled my wristband off, I would have gone home crying. But I wasn't doing it. So I would say not having a lot of it, not building on assumptions or assertions, like not sitting down and going, oh, let me think, okay, I think this is the way people would think, so I'm going to do this, okay, and then you get all the way up here and this isn't steady. Just like if I can get Zach when he pulls his transfer stab against his spine and drops his trail leg at 90 degrees, nobody can snap him. Same thing, right? So that's what I would say also, because I guess most people here don't know anything about me on this call. Like when you met me, they don't know anything about my background.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
it was wrestling was a new kind of thing when
it was new, brand new. I didn't know squat.
But I think like Carolyn is an excellent person to push you out of your comfort zone. Like I can't tell you how many times people were like, wait, why are you going all the way to it? And it does help a lot. Like I would have never applied to colleges based on wrestling. I would have never, done these, gone head first without Karen's guidance. So I think and she's truly selfless in her kind of approach to helping all. So it's just amazing to see her be able to extend that amongst everyone at Wrestling Prep. And I think you're all already taking the right steps by being part of it. I can truly say it helped form me as a awkward high schooler for sure.
Funny. Anybody else have any other questions? So I've taped this. I normally don't tape them. I've taped it, so I'm going to try to upload it, and I'll mark it private and probably share it with the people that are on the call. And, Cooper, you can decide if you want to give out your email or your phone number or whatever.
Yeah.
You can, message me however you want to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with anyone if they have ideas, if they have questions, if they want any recommendations. And I can also send over, like, there's just so many good, easy ways to like throw up a website now and test things. So I have a big list of those that I can send out to anyone who's interested too, because especially now while everyone has a lot of time at home, no reason to not try just following something that you're passionate about, whether that's wrestling or other hobbies as well.
How do you want them to contact you?
I can send an email, or my number's fine too.
Why don't you give it to everybody?
Okay. Yeah, I can put it in this chat. Oh, chat's disabled. I'll
Sorry.
yeah.
We got hacked pretty bad the other day.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know how to enable it.
Okay. I can just, my email's newbycooper@gmail.com. NEWBYCOOPER@gmail.com.
Super. Gary's asking you, Mr. Macias is asking another question.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I'm curious, Cooper, now that we have a lot of extra time on our hands, are there any useful books that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's, so there's a bunch of online articles by Paul Graham, who's a Y Combinator guy, that writes just about startups in general. I think they become more relevant like once you're kind of in the thick of it, but those are great. And then there's a book, I think it's called like Crossing the Chasm or something, about just finding product market fit. And you hit like this lull of like early adopters, and it's hard to tell, if it's a really going to take off because you're getting so much feedback, and some of it's good and some of it's bad. And then there's another one by Ben Horowitz, who's the Andreessen Horowitz guy. It's more about like management and things like that. It's what's it called? I'll look it up. The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. That one's really good.
It sounds
Great,
like
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I'm proud of all of you, and thank you very much, Cooper. This was awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I hope I can help in any way, like if people are interested in starting things. So.
Fantastic. All right, guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow at practice. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.